And hopefully, you have sweeter sleep. So a few days later, this guy turned out again with the counselor, and this time he had a smile on his face. And the counselor was pretty happy and said that, well, I hope now you have good dreams. And he said, well, I did have a dream, but it was different. Now the counselor became curious. How different? And he said, well, the last time when I fell asleep, I dreamed that I was shouting at the principal, and I dreamed that I died of a heart attack. Now the counselor got a bit worried. He says, does that dream end there? He says, no. Then I dreamed that I was floating in the air, and in front of me there were two other gentlemen. The first gentleman approached what was supposedly the heaven's gate, and there was a guy with an iPad, and he asked him for his name. He entered his name, and he asked him for his occupation, and he said he was a stockbroker. His stocks went down, and he came up. The gatekeeper looked at him and says, I'm sorry, stockbroker, you don't deserve to come to this place. And suddenly the word H-E-L-L appeared and disappeared, and that guy disappeared. The next guy came and he said, look, I was a lawyer. Actually, I was an advocate, mostly for the poor. I never charge high fees, And the gatekeeper looked at him and says, I'm sorry, you also don't deserve to come here. And off he went. Then came our friend, the teacher, and he thought, if these two gentlemen don't get in, he was very humble. He put on his head and he thought maybe he should walk away. But the gatekeeper said, hey, you come here. And he asked him for his name. And he said, you're a teacher. He says, yes, I'm a teacher. Welcome to heaven. And he was shocked. And he said, heaven? I thought I just shouted at people. What great deed have I done that I deserve to get into heaven? And he says, did you say you are a teacher? Yes, I'm a teacher. Oh, you already had hell on earth. Teaching is a complex job everywhere in the world. Well, I want to thank the Vaki Foundation for all the wonderful things that have happened. I think it's awesome. We have been also inspired. And to help you capture my speech on some of the insights and points pertaining to what we do in Singapore, I decided to give the tribute to Vaki. And so I will give you an acronym, Vaki, V-A-K-E-Y. That summarizes my speech. First, I'm going to talk to you about values. That the key to teacher preparation is not just the mindset, but the value set, number one. Number two, good teacher preparation is all about authenticity of practice. So it is not just the philosophy, the sociology of education, or even the psychology, but how much we provide the authenticity of practice in the theory-practice link when the teachers are being prepared. Then I'll give you K. There are some key fundamentals that we need to know, right? And then I'm going to give you an E, which is that emotional encouragement that we always underestimate in giving to teachers. And finally, Y, which is the good teacher is about yonder education, looking into the future. V, the emphasis of our education system has always been about values. And teacher preparation in NIE, and you can check the website, is about what I call the V cube, SK, right? Very often people talk about the curriculum as SKA, skills, knowledge, attitudes. But when I was involved in revamping the teacher education program, I said, no. The most important thing that we need to emphasize is about values. So you say, what about values, right? Why V cube? Well, let me tell you this. The first set of values that we want to talk about is that the teacher value is that of one of a passion, an unusual passion, an unusual call for the learner. You can say to some extent that the teacher, perhaps more than anybody else, cares for the learner. In other words, the teacher value is characterized by the desire to help really make a difference to the learner. Now, why value set is so important? Why do teachers get so stressed out? Why do people leave the vocation? Well, it is not just about the mindset. It's not about the theory of teaching you how to motivate a child. If you have this value set of the calling in coming into the profession, then when you see a difficult child, it is a time for creativity. It is a time where you really fulfill what you came in for, because that is your value set. However, if you do not have the value set and you just have that mindset, oh, I just want to teach my subject, I want to teach a good class of kids. And then you see this child coming up, highly irritating, right? That is a problem. You don't want that. You want to change the environment. You want to move from a different neighborhood. You want the child out of the class. So it is not about the mindset. It is about the value set. So right from our recruitment, although we select from very highly selective in terms of the scholastic principles, the scholastic results, but actually when we interview the teachers, all we look for is that value set and that sense of wanting to work with the most difficult situation, the most difficult environment. So the teacher is not the teacher of the subject. We always say that the teacher is the teacher of the learner. I select you based on your background in your achievement in mathematics, but the moment you come in, I'm telling you, you are not a maths teacher. You are a teacher of the child. You are a teacher of the learner. And the value set is that every child can learn and achieve. And we do this in our program. We have what we call the Meranti program. Meranti in the Southeast Asian Society stands for a very resilient, like a redwood. So it's about, we put them through weekend residential program, and they think through their own value system. Their own value system. Because, when you do not know what to do, you tend to do more of what you know. So a lot of time, teachers treat students the way they were taught previously. The way they were brought up by their parents, right? So you need to have them get a sense of clearly what is your value set. So value number one, the learner. Value number two is about the teacher himself. The literature call it teacher identity, but I prefer to call it the teacher personhood. The personhood of the teacher. When you say that you are a teacher, you represent something. And we put in the sense, the teachers, the fact that as a teacher, you are symbolic of learning. You are symbolic of the respect of learning. And I think we all would agree that when society despises the teacher, and if parents do not teach the children to respect the teachers, actually it is a great loss. When I talk to parents, I tell parents, you know what? If we don't respect our teachers, your children is not going to respect you. Because when they don't respect the teachers, they don't respect learning. When they don't respect learning, they don't know how to learn from authority anymore, from the sages, from the wise. So it is very important that the teacher understand the personhood, that whether you like it or not, the teacher epitomizes the symbolism of the importance of learning, the preservation of traditions, right? So it is very, very key. So it is the personhood of the teacher. And that is why we say that when you are a teacher, you role model learning. So a teacher would talk to the children and expound her own values, expound her own learning. The humility of the fact I'm also learning. That if I solve a problem wrongly, I make a mistake. I didn't know. I need to learn with you. So it is about the personhood of the teacher, of high standards, high quality, right, as a holistic person. Number three, value is very important. Right in our teacher preparation, we create a system where teachers learn to appreciate the value of the community. First, their own teaching professional community, right? Every teacher can mentor another teacher. So we create a transparency where teachers do not feel threatened. That if I go into your classroom, I'll learn something from you. When you come into my classroom, you learn something from me. So mentoring is a very important aspect of the community, right? Older teachers also get mentored. So I always share with them that I still have mentors. My mentors are 80 over years old, I still go to them. I'm still learning. So it is a community where somebody is being mentored all the time, and somebody is always mentoring somebody else. So this is a kind of a building of the community. So it is more than just the technical term of professional network, but that sense of the fact that we belong to a community that builds the society, right? So the learner, if you got the learner, the identity, and the community. This form the 3 sets of values. When your values are right, you can talk about the skills, you can talk about the knowledge. When their values are right, because they want to help this child with a special need, and suddenly they realize that, hey, there's something that I need to know more. I tell you, the teacher will go to the library, he will pour through the books, and he will learn and see, how do I help this kid? You don't have to set assignment, and test them on what theory and so on. In fact, I make it a rule to all my professors. I said, no single assignment must be about just writing of the theories or the philosophy of it. None of it. Everything must be linked to an actual practical situation. Every assignment must lead to, better still, an accomplishment of some projects together where we learn ideas to impact the student teachers. So that's the V. A, the authenticity. I think we have found increasingly that it is important that universities that prepare teachers work with the schools. And we humbly acknowledge that the schools, the people who are in the front line, they know more than we do. And so one of the keys in the Singapore system is that we work very, very closely with the Ministry of Education and with the schools. In this partnership, what we do is to ensure that we give teachers the real, authentic situation of what is happening in the classroom. So they get to hear, right, from the experienced teachers. They get to be immersed in those situations. And in fact, because of our emphasis on it and our research on the fact that the teaching practice component needs to be stronger, I actually extended, for example, my postgraduate program. It used to be a year. I actually extended to 1.5 years, just to give it another half year of practice, right? And to dispel this mindset of just quickly getting an accreditation, because it is not just the accreditation. It's the fact that you want to have that deep experience right? And we got the funding for it. We fought for it for many years. Policy makers don't like to spend more money in preparation, right? But we were insistent on it. Our research shows that, our experience shows that, and we persist. And when they could, this was what we did. Our scholars program, we have a degree scholars program, and we expose them. Thanks to Professor Fernando, who has been a great influence to us and a great advisor to us. We help them to become more global citizens. Fernando, you'll be happy to hear that now our scholars are going to Vietnam and things like that, because Singapore is too small, right? And I have to be ashamed when people ask if do you challenge your teachers to go to a refugee area to teach. Unfortunately, Singapore is too small, and even our most difficult neighborhood probably is not very difficult when you look at the world's perspective. But even then, whatever it is, I think the teacher sense of values, of authenticity is very key. I want to talk about some key principles. I think the key principles is that in all good teacher education, we've got to spend a lot of time on pedagogy. And I want to say something about pedagogy. The pedagogy that we give to our children and our student teachers to help our children has to be balanced. And it's very simple. I use a principle of 2 words, habits and novelty. I think there is enough in the psychological literature that shows that children do learn well by habits. There are powerful, useful routines, right? All of these are important. So there's some value in the drill. So we do not throw all this away, right? So it is not about whether you have too much drilling or whether you swing to the extreme where you have so much discovery. I think we always have to have the balance. Admittedly, Asian educational system tend to capitalize too much on learning through habits, right? We learn very well by memory, by imitation, by modeling. But these are by no means bad, because they are good for building certain fundamentals, but far from sufficient, right? And so it is important to balance where your pedagogy, right, involve helping students work in groups, embrace 21st century skills, problem-based learning, project-based learning. And the key to doing all of this is actually doing it right in the teacher education. So my student teachers will experience, in the psychology module, problem-based learning. They start with a scenario of real problem, right? So they will experience case study. They will experience the whole variety of the pedagogy, rather than hear about the theory of the pedagogy. So I think that is very, very key. I think the other key balance is that you got to balance in terms of what we call phases of development. Very often, I think the problem we face in education reform is we hear about something good and we want to practice it, and then we try to scale it up. But the truth of the matter is, things go in phases. It could be that at a certain stage in the educational system, right, you may need more of A, less of B, right? So it is not just about one or the other, but things are implemented in phases. Singapore's education system, it is where it is today, is over 20 to 30 years of evolution, right? So it takes things happen in phases, right? And depending on the phase of the context, you have to apply certain things more. So it's not a one stroke that will satisfy all, right? So it's very, very important to think in terms of the different phases, right? Finally, right, come to E. The emotional encouragement of teachers is very, very, very key. And we emphasize that a lot to our teachers. And we always tell our teachers to the class, maybe just 40 students, maybe 100 students that you meet in a week. But to the child, you are that one teacher. You are that one teacher. And it's very, very critical that you really make students feel good. Imagine the damage that could be done to a child when the child feels discouraged in your class, right? So the emotional aspect is very important. And it begins again with the teachers. And so it is very critical to have this positive mindset growth perspective. In fact, the way we evaluate our teachers is also based on what we call the developmental growth model, right? Teachers are not evaluated based on student results. Never, right? Students are evaluated based on, first of all, their self-evaluation on what is it I have done this year, how would I want to do better next year, what are the things I intend to do, and where are the areas of development. And so they will agree on this, and then they will work on it. So it is about growing. It's about developing, right? A positiveness. And it's very critical. I think we embrace the fact that teachers need to have, first of all, their own self-awareness of where they are, their strengths, their weakness, so that they can grow, right? Teachers need to be able to very positively manage emotions. Because managing parents, a lot of times, is also managing their emotions. They need to be able to manage the parents' emotion. Teachers need to be able to motivate themselves. I always tell the teachers, the society do not owe you a motivation. The Ministry of Education do not owe you a motivation. Do you know who is the one who should motivate you? Yourself. Yeah. So we do things in PD, we always do things to tell teachers, you got to wow yourself. You got to wow yourself. I even have a physical hand movement to bring my teachers through. We always tell them, first put your hand to your heart. Maybe you want to do that. You're a little bit tired of hearing. Put your hand to your heart and say, self-awareness. If you know yourself a lot more, it's already a big improvement. Number two, we always ask them to take the goodie hand and say, manage emotions, manage emotions, manage emotions. And we tell our teachers, you never get angry. You never get angry. Why? Because if you shout at a child in anger, you shout at a parent in anger, right? You are always wrong, right? Do we get angry? Of course. We teach them how to have stress relief technique. Goes to the toilet, shout, and ah! And then come out calm. And I tell them, when the principal expects you to be frustrated and you lose your cool and you are calm, people got bewildered. So we help them to manage their emotions. And I say, you got to wow yourself. Put your hands up, wow. You got to wow yourself. And we put down our hands and we say, the most important thing about teacher is about receiving your students. Receiving your students. It's not even about empathy. People talk about empathy in the technical terms of counseling. We have empathy, being in the shoes of somebody. No, no, no. It's about receiving people. How do the kids feel received? The kids may have done something wrong, but in front of you, do they feel received? How do we receive children? Because we know that when kids do something wrong, when kids have problems, it's always not so simple. There's a whole backlog of things, right? And our role as teachers is to nurture them, right? It's to receive them. And to build people. Build people. Education is about building people. So all the time we are building people. Actually, even in the most difficult case, even in the most difficult disciplinary case, our underpinning idea always is, how do we build these people from A to B? So the emotional encouragement is often so missing. So in a good teacher education curriculum, the importance to forge that community of positiveness is very, very, very key. Finally, yonder education. That is to have a future orientation. I think we hear enough this morning from Mr. Thomas Friedman, that about the future. And so it is not just about the now, but how do we prepare teachers to face the environment of the future? And we want to be realistic to our teachers, that indeed, the new environment is complex, right? And what we are preparing you is to be able to have this learning curve, the deep learning curve. And we recognize that. In fact, I fully am in agreement with the emphasis that has been in this theme of this conference. Learning from the Olympiads, the Bear Grylls in his challenge to Mount Everest. Actually, we have a Singapore team of my students who are going to Mount Everest, and we in fact I just received a message yesterday. We just raised enough fund for them, to go climb Mount Everest. And I think this is a kind of the kind of challenge that we need to equip our people. Singapore did not start successful right away. It takes us about many years. When I started school, it was 1965, the year Singapore gained independence. And I remember very clearly, as a child, in those days, there were always drill, and I didn't understand fully why we were doing that, and we had to run under the table and stay beneath under the table. Why? Because those were the days of a lot of racial riot. And the windows would be smashed with stones and with things like that. And so whenever there is a drill, we got to quickly run under the table to make sure that we are safe from all these kind of falling objects and things like that. But the founding father, our founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew said, the goal of the education, very clearly, he just said in two simple statements, the goal of education is the good man. The good man. That is why our values base, the character, the good man, number one. Number two, a useful, contributing citizen to his society, to the nation, to the world. So that underpins, the whole philosophy of education. And I fully agree with the themes these days to emphasize that the human aspect. So it is not about just the curriculum, the content. In fact, dealing with the innovation of today, we have had a lot of discussion in recent years about content and about curriculum. And we realized that actually at the end of the day, the key is the teacher. Is the teacher. You can have the best curriculum written, but if we do not have the right teacher factor, the people with the calling, with the passion, then again, all the nice written instructional manual amounts to nothing. But if you have the committed teacher, then I always say in my graduation speech to my teachers that, to me, the teacher has to be the most creative person. Because every year, you meet a different batch of people. I close with one last story. When I was a deputy headmaster of a school, I always wanted to set the example by taking the most difficult class. So one year I took a class, and I was told that you better be ready. Because this class has some real gangsters. And in Asian society, they belong to what we call secret society. And we are in secret society, it means that they're really gangs, they're really rough, right? So I had to take the class. And I knew who these ringleaders are. So you know when you get into the class and you see this teenager, tall, big guy, you know, he just doesn't respect you. And he's going to set the tone to get this whole class not to respect you. And I always tell this story to my beginning teachers. I said, then you got to be creative. You got to ask yourself, now, how am I going to win this guy over? This guy is big, and I don't want to get to fight with his gang, right? So I said this, you know, when I was taking the class, this guy is Jeffrey. I said, Jeffrey, please meet me in the canteen. Meet me in the canteen, right? And it was in the very, very first week. And he thought it was kind of special because most of the time, every time he is caught, he is meeting the teacher in the principal's office. And I said, this guy is weird because he just asked me to meet in the canteen. I said, yes, it's a canteen. When we reached there, I told Jeffrey, he showed up, you know. I said, sit down, take a seat. I said, I don't think you have your breakfast, right? Yeah. I got him a coffee. In Asia, we have this nasi lemak rice. I got him a nasi lemak, and we sat down, and I just ate with him, you know. I said, Jeffrey, we're going to be together. At least 2 years, you know, we're going to be together. I smiled at him. That's all. I said, very good. He was surprised. Next day, I tell you, you go to the class again. As usual, his own disposition, he get carried away, and he's looking funny, and then he's, you know, talking while you're right in front. You know, because in Asian society, we always stand and we always got to greet. And this guy would, you know, act funny. But when I look at him in the eyes, I smile at him. He remembered the coffee he drank from me. It's different, you know, when you add my nasi lemak, you know. And so we always share with the teachers that every situation is a call for creativity. This guy finally, you know, graduated. He, among some others, never failed to come back to me. You know. So the point here is that, in fact, every time you meet a cohort, lots of creativity is needed to how to win the heart of a child. And even in pedagogy, you know, how do you bring a pedagogy that win the hearts of the children? I'm not a footballer, and I was not very literate in the football game. But I knew when I was teaching a class, this class, they just love football. Then you just got to learn it and use that at the basis to teach your physics, your science, and everything. That calls for creativity. That calls for a new learning curve. So that is what it is to have the calling of the teacher. So I hope this gives you an insight into the kind of value-based system that we have. And I can tell you quite honestly that, in fact, to my own personal surprise many times, I am so gratified, you know, that somehow within the system got and attracted people like myself into the system. And I realized that there are many, many more like me within the education system in Singapore that are really so good. Recently, I was just talking to some senior people, and they were saying that, why the mathematics in Singapore is so good, you ask? I can tell you very, very honestly, because there were many, many good students who were very good in mathematics. You know, my first career choice was in engineering, but somehow I ended up in teaching. So were many other people. But because we were called into that profession, right, we decided to take this profession with passion, and we decided that we are going to make a difference to generations after generations. And this is the simple reason, the teacher factor, the real teacher factor that enables that good teaching to happen. That have created generations that are, I can tell you, disproportionately represented in terms of the mathematics Olympiad and so on, because there is truly good teaching. And there is not just good teaching, there are really passionate teachers who care for the learners. Thank you very much.